Hey everyone, before we get into this video, I just want to say thank you for the 250 subscribers, and also thank you for the 7,500 views on the Mr. F video.
Game jams are fun, right? You get to make a sick little game idea for some people to play. You get to experiment with mechanics, systems, and game design. That's pretty cool. And if you've done a jam, you know that every single time you're done with it, you're completely satisfied with your product, right?
It's fiction. It's fiction. We made it up.
If you watched my last video, you'd know that it was about how I want a game jam because of good time management and a ton of polish. But in reality, that's rarely the case for my jams. Most jams I've done, I left feeling drained with little to show for it. I play other people's games and notice how polished and simple they are. I always say after every jam that I'm gonna go back and update the game jam game to make it more fun, but every time I say that, it just never happens. But now I'm gonna attempt to make one of my past game jams more appealing. It's only been about 2 years since I created it.
It's been 84 years.
So the game I'll be updating is Drop Blocks. I submitted this game to the Wowee Jam back in January of 2020. It's actually so bad that I pulled it from my itch page a while back with the plan to eventually fix the glaring issues. The goal of the game is to climb the following blocks in the screen in order to get to the exit. There are different types of blocks that have different effects on the player. There are blocks that shrink and grow the player and affect their jump height. Honestly, I really like the concept of this game, but I wasn't able to execute it very well. Now, I'm going to play through it and give an honest rating on it. Then I'll figure out major pain points of the game and try to fix those as fast as possible. After that, I'll add some much needed polish to the game and update the character. To keep myself from going down a rabbit hole, I'm not allowing myself to change the goal of the game. So essentially, the character has to continue to climb blocks to get to the exit. Everything else around that concept is fair game. I might modify the gameplay a little bit, but overall this should be similar to the original. Like, I did this all at the last, couple hours of the game jam, or hour or whatever. Submitting, creating a title screen, creating a jam page, kind of like I talked out in my last video. That's what you should not do. And I'm actually stuck on this, like in this corner right here, which is an issue that I could not fix. And you basically have to balance. It's not really much of a balance. So the game's not super fun. So after playing it, it seems there are a lot of low-hanging fruit I can handle. The movement is slippery and buggy. The title screen needs an overhaul. The level scaling needs to be updated. The leaderboard should just be changed to a local high score. The sounds need to be updated. On top of that, I would like to spruce up the art in the game if I have time. I found the Unity project, and then I realized at some point I was already working on some updates, so I'll just look back at my commit messages to see what's going on here. Nice. And while we're at it, let's take a look at the file structure. Beautiful. Uncle Bob would be proud. Now that I have a ton of information to go off of, I'll just give it an eye test to see what's different. Alright, so I just played it and it turns out somehow I made things worse for the most part. The only thing I like is just having the level always take up the entire screen. The movement is broken, jumping feels heavier, and it's flat out broken when on a block. So first, we'll fix the movement. I'm going to copy and paste the code from Mr. F to be completely honest. This will save me a bunch of time. A big issue was the movement itself in the game is very slippery. If you press left or right, you move like an entire block, which makes this a bad experience from the jump. The jump itself is also very floaty. Importing this stuff should fix that. Once I get that in, I'll be able to make the game playable again with the beam. So I've got that in, and here's the result. Next, I think I'll work on fixing the physics of the blocks. At the moment, it's pretty janky. The blocks sometimes get stuck on each other when falling, they fall through the floor, and then jitter when the player jumps on them. So far, I've changed the block's rigid body from dynamic to kinetic, and I use translate with a raycast to detect what's below the block. Now the stacking is looking a lot better, and the player can't bounce the blocks when they land. Now that that's in, look at how much better this looks. So I'm going to change the pace a bit and start updating the visuals. I remember playing the game Kyjor as a kid, and this game vaguely reminds me of it. So I want to use that as an inspiration. This game was meant to have an arcade feel to it the first time I worked on it, so I'll try and capture that this time with the art. I'll be using an NES palette I found on low spec and create a little orange character. It turned out that it started looking like a fish, so now the theme of the game is under the sea. At this point, I think a simple story of people dropping stuff in the water that the player has to avoid is simple and makes sense. At this point in the project, I noticed myself losing steam and constantly driving up the scope, so I'm going to update my planner with a set of specific tasks that I need to complete to call this project done. There's always room for improvement, but I also want to get this video out. I have about 11 tasks to do now. They all should take a decent amount of time each, but now I feel much more guided than I was before this. After a while, I knock a few tasks out and it's starting to look and feel like a game. I have some music and more sound. I updated the pixel art and I updated the UI for what will be the life system. The player will start with 2 lives and will have the opportunity to earn more later. Next, I added some more sound effects and created a death animation. I added sound effects for the blocks dropping, the player walking, and for the death in the animation. Up next, I'm going to be removing the title screen. In place of that, we'll have an arcade style title screen in the same scene as the game. So we'll start everything with the game disabled, and once the player decides to start the game, they can just press any button. I realize that I don't have a new name for the game yet, so I'll just call it Fishy. Then we'll add some text that tells the player to press any button. We'll also animate it a bit as well. After this, I finish up the game loop and add a local high score in. Now it feels like something that's worthy enough to go in my portfolio. There was nothing groundbreaking, I just fixed what needed to be fixed and made the game feel less like a buggy mess. From here, I'm just gonna do a bit more polishing and bug fixing. I'll play the game a bit and balance it. Before I finish this devlog, I'd like to clarify the entire point of this project. This wasn't to make the game super fun or to make it super popular and get a lot of plays. The whole point of this was to take a game I wasn't proud of and make it portfolio worthy. The way it is now is way more presentable and complete than the original Jam game. I also felt like I could come back to the game and make it better, which I've done. It was always nagging me in the back of my head, and now I feel like this project finally has some closure in my mind. Now it's time to move on to bigger and better things. Well, that's that. Overall, I'd call this a success. I think this has helped improve my portfolio along with having the satisfaction of realizing how far I've grown. If you like this video and want to see more Game Jam revamps, leave a like and a comment below.